In my situation, I did have a very kind of narcissistic and bullying and physically bullying mother. And I was the one that was the scapegoat and was continually hit and then emotionally kind of overpowered for a lot of my childhood. I seem to have done all right since then. I think a lot of people come through, but kind of has an effect. And I'm mentioning that because it just seems there is a lot of karma. So everybody will have their different stories, be it their childhood, be it their relationship, be it feeling overwhelmed at work, be it from the powers that be. I mean, it's all around us at the minute. Some people feel like we are being controlled at the minute with all of these vaccines and all of these things around COVID and different things. Some people think that's fine. Other people think they're being lied to and manipulated. So this seems to be a thing that affects the lungs. And in the face of abuse, quite often people will close down their energies to try and make themselves small or hidden. And a primary way of doing that is to close down your breath. And in the case of physically being hit, children often hit on the buttocks, and that plays directly into the pelvic floor, which for me is the seat of our breath. It's kind of where, in many ways, it's starting from the pelvic floor. And if that becomes a continual thing, that whole area just goes into shock and trauma. And if that goes on for years, it just stays there. It just becomes a learnt behaviour. If you get hit around the face, the side of the head, in the face, the roof of the mouth is relating to the diaphragm, the maxillary sinuses are relating to the lungs, so here or here, on a continual basis, worked into that. The side of the cranium, you know, baby's a small thing, so a hand will cover that whole area, and it goes into the brain, it affects the brain. You've got the tentorium right through the center of the brain, going laterally. That is the diaphragm, in the same way as the one under the lungs, in the same way as the pelvic floor. And it affects the breath through the brain. And if that is tight, then the breath is tight all the way through. If you're being hit or abused or just scared of somebody on one side of you, maybe everyone sits at a table in the same place and there's a family member you're scared of, so you kind of recoiling or moving away from that presence, and it aligns into the body. So these abusive situations or hard situations, they will affect the breath. It just seems where a lot of that lingers. It is in the lungs, in the chest, in the mechanism of the breath. And it doesn't mean that it's forever. You can learn breath work and learn to breathe more fully and start letting those patterns just unfold. And by breathing in a new way, you're opening up new neural pathways rather than the learnt pathways. By aligning with the universe, aligning with your natural breath, then you are creating new neural pathways which you learn over time to use those. The brain is a bit like a computer, you know, it just will create new pathways, and then it uses those more and more, then they become myelinated, and that means they're preferred and they travel faster through that circuit. So it can be undone. And as we work more into a natural breath, the emotions that are held from those traumas and the judgments on ourselves and the judgments on the other people and the physical imprints, if you've been hit, can start unraveling. And the way I work with holographic breathing is we go at a very gentle speed. It's not a catharsis type thing where people, go full on into a trauma vortex and, shouting or screaming or whatever. It's a meditative approach where we just gently sit on the edge of the feelings or emotions and let them unravel in a place of meditation where we are still properly in our body and able to feel them in a comfortable way. And once you allow yourself to feel those qualities, those sensations, in a way, those are the qualities, those are the sensations, those are the feelings that you may have suppressed your breath not to feel. And by allowing them, they can process, they can leave, we can become all right with them, and the breath can fill out the spaces where those traumas or feelings we didn't want to feel were. And for myself, it is a weak point. The chest, lungs are a weak point. I had pneumonia at 4. I had asthma. Ever after that, it stopped as soon as I left home, but I had asthma for all of those years. I always had bronchitis 2 or 3 times a year. So it really heavily held into my chest the situation that was going on there. For different people it will hold into different things, but for me it was the chest. And a lot of abused children or people with hard childhood, their chest can be pulled in, it can be concave sometimes, and this also is often a mark of if somebody has had a hard childhood. And on the other side of that, we can't say that we are just a victim and somebody else has done that to us. I know it's not easy as a child because you don't have a lot of choices in it. But for me, that karma definitely relates back into past lives, and maybe a child isn't educated enough how to be with it at the time, but soon as you leave you can start becoming educated how to be with that. You don't have to play out being a victim. You can learn how to be with it and let it unravel so it doesn't get repeated and you don't take it on into your next incarnation. Deal with it now. Deal with it this lifetime. Some of the physical parts of it may not leave, but you can work with all the how it feels sensorily, how it feels emotionally, the different constructs of the mind that evolved out of it. You can work with this. Sometimes it physically gets better. Once you get past a certain age, things don't physically change so quickly. But at a certain stage, we're all going to get old and die anyway. But you can work with the qualities of it and unravel that karma. And what came through in the last group, and what it just making itself present at the moment, was kind of some strong channels came through that just seemed, for me, and people emailed afterwards, just taking karma away. It was like the channel came in. It's like once you've come to a point where you're able to let go of stuff, that quality did come in last time, and people said it was just like stuff was being drawn out of them. And that isn't from me, that's just from a channel that came in at the time. It may be something to do with Tibetan pulsing, that is holographic breathing, the energetics of it is very similar to a healing system called Tibetan pulsing, and I knew or worked with the teacher for many years, and I get the feeling he's working from the other side, but I get a feeling there's a whole team there. There's his teachers and the whole place that it came from. So it may not be per se Diraj, but there was certainly something like that feeling last time that a few people remarked on afterwards. So there is how we hold it in this lifetime, but also it's hard to heal things on the same level. In a way, you have to go to a level above to allow it to go home. And when we're working with the spine as we do, and when we're working with the brain, which is fully accessible in holographic breathing, it then gives the ability to it also open through the crown chakra and to release into the high energy, so you can share it with these higher beings, with these higher energies, with this higher form of yourself. It can connect into the earth, because there is a natural matrix there. There is the matrix and energies of the earth, which is natural. There is the matrix and energies of the higher self and universe, which is kind of natural. And in a way, we may have got a bit bent out of shape or confused a bit with the different things that have happened to us. But once we let those things and the organs that they've affected communicate with the earth, communicate with the higher self, communicate with the beyond, so that can start resolving, and there's all sorts of help that we didn't know was possible before. And a lot of the reasons, those injuries, those feelings we don't want to feel, those ways we've knocked out of shape, a lot of the reasons they are there is because we are holding them there. We don't want to feel them. But to communicate them with the higher self, to communicate with them with the earth, you have to be able to feel them. You have to be able to open to yourself enough to feel them. And if things come up that are hard to be with in holographic breathing, that is a good sign, because that means it's coming to a level where you can feel it. And in the feeling of it, it's going home. And with these webinars, we do just seem to be getting a lot of help to help it go home. You know, it's not just us here, not just these people on earth here, and we're not so much in charge as we think we are. The universe is huge. The spiritual beings and apparatus is far beyond what we can even start to imagine or understand. So a lot of it is just to trust that that is there to help, and not just trust but also allow the help. You don't have to be psychic, you don't have to be a channel, you just have to be open to that and allow a communication with the energies and beyond. Because if you just work with it within yourself and your own mind, it can really just go round and round, and you're still dealing with the same thing 10 years later. But if you're allowing it to communicate to the higher self, and you're going into it in a state of meditation where you are fully in yourself, then these things can be resolved. And sharing them with the beyond, it's amazing how they can just be taken home. And I think we're in one of those times at the minute. Either, for me, either we are kind of coming to the end of existence on this planet, or we're coming to a big change. I can't see how we're not coming to a big change at the minute. And in big change, there is the possibility of big transformation. And often, to go through that change, you can't just do it politically or things like that. Everyone has to go through it spiritually. So my feeling is that is there to help, and we're not as alone in the investigation as we may think we are. We've worked a lot with the rectum and the sexual energies at the beginning of this. We will be connecting to the rectum as the base energy rising through this circuit to properly work with the lungs. If you just do the lungs, you're too high, you're right up here. You need to work with the abdomen as well. Very few people actually properly work with the pelvic floor or with the rectum. For me to breathe really nicely in that way, you need the rectum releasing, you need the energies of the rectum releasing, and they come up as the kundalini, and they will ignite the colon and they will ignite the lungs. So we will be incorporating what we've already done with the rectum and colon, but taking that higher, so that initial impetus, that sexual potency, rises through that circuit and changes into the different energies as it goes, and then opening and closing through the lungs. So you can get deep into the cells of the lungs. I mean, this really, every time we've come to the lung circuit, I've gone down with a chest infection. And it's no different today. Just a few days ago, as we're building up to it, I started getting chest infection. Teaching, it goes away. The spirits come in and it's not there. And I feel this deep upset. It's not so much in the bones, in the muscles, and the mechanics that do the breath. That upset is in the tissues, or mainly for me in the cells and the tissues of the lungs. And if you're just having this experience of it opening and closing, and that the lungs are somehow doing that, it doesn't really give you the possibility to release that. But if you have this overall concertinaing opening through the whole body, through every bone and muscle, through the whole cranium, through the whole body, which is available in holographic breathing, then the lungs aren't doing it anymore. It's very clearly the bones and muscles are physically working. All the muscles actually shortening on their in-breath to open the chest. So the muscles and bones are doing the work, the lungs are being massaged. The ribs are opening, and because you can't get a vacuum there, the lungs fill out that space and the air comes in. The lungs are the ribs are closing. The lungs are passive. They go with that. They close. The breath comes out. And once you get a sense of that, rather than you are doing it or fighting for breath, you feel your whole body moving, which is active. And the lungs are passive and just being massaged. They don't have muscles. The lungs don't have muscles. They are just breathing. There is the intercellular muscles and membranes of the cells which are probably moving along with it, but it's really these bones and muscles that are opening and closing. And when you feel that, rather than doing the lungs, to the lungs being massaged, it really gets into all those little bits of upset, all that karma, not just for this life. You know, maybe you had some trouble with a situation or a person. It may have been really difficult and you may have nearly died and you may have been injured. But very rarely do I see things that are just isolated to this lifetime. They somehow have resonances through our past lifetimes, through our culture. You know, a lot is imprinted into us in our culture. Like a woman in Afghanistan at the moment will have a very different experience to a woman in the West somewhere. We get a lot of cultural pressure on us in different ways. But for me, there's connections through all of our past lives, and that starts to be released. And as soon as it's going through the spine, it is the bardo, it is your past lives, it's all of it. And once you can feel it like that, rather than being so deeply in the thing that just goes round and round, it's more you can drop back, you can start watching it unravel like a film. And definitely as we start being able to breathe with the brain and the cranium, you're more in contact with the intellect breathing and the neurons breathing, and they don't have the same experience of it as where we're more feeling normally in the feeling area in this. Once the breath is through the brain and you really get, there's a different view. It's more like you just feel this wheel of Dharma going round, and those things, you can view them, they don't have the same meaning, and they can go home. So we're going to work with it in that way. We're going to work with it, this concertinaing, opening, closing, then we're going to drop into the energies, and there'll be 2 meditations, and we'll go a bit further each one. I will show you the points